All right, so I'm here with Sara Kuennen, who has two small, beautiful children who were with her when the storm hit. And so, I wanted her to have the chance to kind of talk about what that was like. I believe you were driving, was that the case? Um, so
Yep.
I guess I'll just get out of the way here. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience, what you were doing, and kind of what went through your head when the storm hit and happened?
Yeah, definitely. We were heading out for an appointment and we had looked at the weather and saw that a storm was coming, but we obviously didn't think that it was going to be anything too bad. We were going to drop our 7-week-old off at my parents' house. So we had just pulled onto the interstate, my husband and I, and we had our 7-week-old in the back. And we're like 2 minutes from our house on the interstate, and we just saw this big flash of red, and we still don't know what it was, if it was like a transformer blue, but I've heard other people saw it too. And suddenly everything got really still, and we just saw signs start bending. And so I immediately started panicking, and I was telling my husband, I'm like, we need to turn around, we need to go home. And he's like, I know, stay calm, we'll get off. So we got off the interstate and started taking a back way home. And again, we were like 2 minutes from our house, and already trees were down and we couldn't get home. So we had to find a parking lot nearby just to pull into, because the winds were coming in so fast and we were watching trees fall, we were watching signs bend, and I was terrified. So we pulled off into a parking lot. And then that's where we were for the duration of the storm, which was absolutely terrifying to be in a car for that with a 7-week-old.
I can imagine. So how long do you think you were sitting in that parking lot? Was it 20, 30 minutes?
It was at least 30. The crazy thing was, we had just heard on the radio, they said the storm was lasting like 15 minutes. So when we parked, I crawled into the back seat with my son, and I was just really, and my husband was trying to keep me calm, and he was said a 30-minute storm. So we were kind of like, is this ever going to end? And every time a big wind gust would come, I'm just like waiting for a tree to fall or a stop sign to come flying. So thankfully we were safe though.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be such a surreal experience to, have to be in a car when and see all that kind of going on around you. Um, do you think it was just a bad storm, or did were you afraid that something else was going to happen?
I was really nervous that there was going to be like a tornado, or just how fast the gusts were. I was just so scared something was going to come at us. I mean, shingles were hitting the car and stuff. But we just I just wasn't sure. And then when it started letting up a little bit, we wanted to head home, but I was scared like another round was going to come through, because immediately we couldn't access internet, we couldn't call anyone, so we had no way of seeing like the radar, or the radio wasn't working. We were like completely blind as to what was going on and what was coming still, which fortunately there wasn't anything coming still, but we had no way of knowing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, after that kind of thing shatters your sense of what's possible, then it's like, well, now anything's possible, I'm sure. Uh,
Seriously, yeah.
so you sent over a couple pictures I just wanted to throw up here. So let's see, screen share. So was this when you were driving before or after?
This was after. So yeah, we had parked only a few minutes away from our house, but it took us an hour and a half to get home, because every route that we tried to take, there were massive trees down. And so this was one route that we tried to go, and it's kind of hard to tell, but there's just a giant old tree laying in the middle of the road. And eventually, the route we were able to take to get home, there were no trees, but there was standing water, and we just had to drive through it and hope that it wasn't super deep. So we parked at the bottom of our street. We live on a big hill, and we got out and we put our son in his stroller and started walking up the hill. And there were so many trees and power lines down. Then I took him out, and I'm holding the car seat, and my husband's holding the folded stroller. And we're literally like climbing over and under power lines to get to our house. It was insane.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, that's so terrifying to think about. You just don't know where to step, and like
Mhm.
wanting to make sure that you're safe, and then having your son in, your hands, and wanting to make sure you don't trip and fall or anything like that.
Exactly.
All right, let me see. Grab another photo here. So, um, I'm gonna share this one.
Yeah, this one was at the end of our street. So this was where we parked, and that's like the first thing we saw was this giant tree just uprooted, and that's how it was all over the city. It was crazy to see that.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like something out of a movie, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah, and we live in an older part of town with a lot of old trees. We actually live on a in-town wooded acreage, so we have a lot of trees, but they're way at the end of our yard. So we didn't, I know a lot of them fell, but we didn't really have to worry about them because they're sort of in a timber. But on our street itself, almost like every other neighbor had a tree on their house or their tree was in the street.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell us about this guy. What was he doing throughout the whole thing?
Yeah, so this is our 7 week old Asa, and he slept through the whole thing somehow. But luckily, I had also, I brought milk with me. So when we're trying to find a way home, I had milk on hand that I could feed him and try and keep him calm. But that was part of the reason we did want to get home because I'm like, we need more milk and I need to change his diaper. And, this was not expected, but he's just yawning. So luckily, he had no idea what was going on.
Unfazed.
Yeah, yeah, thankfully. And my 2-year-old daughter was actually at daycare, thankfully, because she's scared of storms. And so I can only imagine what that would have been like if she had been in the car with us.
Yeah. So what was going through your head? Obviously, you had to deal with your son being in the car, but when you were thinking about your daughter, was there anything during the time when you're watching the storm where you're thinking, oh my gosh, is she okay? How are you kind of processing all of that?
Yeah, I was worried about her, but I knew that she's in a facility and I knew that they'd be safe and they have a place to go. So I felt good about that. But I mean, it sounds a little dramatic, but I was more worried about what if something happens to my husband and I, and then she's left alone. And that's what really scared me about being in the car is you see those horror stories about trees falling on people in cars. And I'm just like, I was just so worried that, something would happen to us and then leave her all alone. Um, but thankfully, that was not the case. We were safe and uninjured. So,
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. You just gave me goosebumps. You were describing that because I can't imagine just having to confront that reality of not knowing, what's going to
yeah.
happen to you.
Yeah.
Um, so, you finally are able to get home through back roads or kind of the scenic route to home.
Yeah.
And you get there, and then what do you do? Are there other family members you're worried about? What are you trying to do once you get home and, okay, we're okay, son's okay? Then what?
Yeah, so we were fortunate to not have very much damage at all, very minimal. So once we got home, we were just worried about family. A lot of my family lives in town, and we could not get a hold of anyone, nor could we really leave to go check on anyone. So that first night, like evening into the night, was just sort of blind. I was finally able to get a hold of my parents, and they had water coming in through their ceiling. Well, my mom actually, and we couldn't get a hold of my dad because he had been out. So then I was pretty worried about that, but by the end of the night, everyone was accounted for. Thank God. But it was really crazy just to have everyone's phones being down. You can't even get on social media. It was just a blind spot for everyone.
That's, I had no idea. Then when my parents called me, they're like, we're not going to be able to talk to you for a while because we don't have electricity. We can't charge our phones. It was just such a weird place to be. How did you have electricity? Were you out for any period of time?
We were out for 4 days. And so it was tough because we didn't have a generator or anything. And obviously, one of the hard things is having kids. I'm still getting up in the middle of the night with my youngest. And so doing overnight feedings in the dark was interesting. And, just having to swaddle him. It gets so hot in the house, but I still wanted to swaddle him. And my daughter, I still wanted to shut and lock her window overnight. And so that was tough. And I actually, this was one of the more heartbreaking things for me is because of the power outage, I lost 400 ounces of breast milk. And
Oh
so
my
that,
gosh.
that was heartbreaking. I had been spending 7 weeks getting that stocked up for when my son goes to daycare, and then it all thawed when we lost power. So that was too bad, but obviously there's worse things. So I recovered from that.
Yeah, it's still, I just can't imagine, thinking about that period of trying to get ready for school and having a young child and then having this on top of that. I'm
Yeah.
sure, physically and emotionally it gets exhausting.
Yeah, it definitely does. It took a toll, but I mean, we powered through, and we weren't out of power as long as some people were. So I was thankful we got it back as soon as we did. But we're still waiting on internet. So
Wow, so you still don't have internet. How long has it been? 3 weeks?
yeah, so I'm using a hotspot right now for this, and I mean, we have a lot of DVDs, so we've been going through those, and thank goodness, a lot of providers, including ours, Verizon, is giving unlimited data until September 1st as of right now, and so that's been helpful because we pay for our data, so we would have had major overages if we didn't have that.
Yeah, that's really nice and I'm sure
Yeah,
so helpful. Um,
yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So you've been on maternity leave, it sounds like, through this time. How has your husband, been doing with work? Have you had to do troubleshoot any of that, or have you been able to, mostly take care of your family and then kind of like the immediate, friends and family around you?
Yeah, it's been okay. It hasn't been too bad. Obviously, yes, my husband has to, go to work through all of this, through the pandemic and then the storm. But, things haven't been too bad. We've been able to make it work. As I said, I have a ton of family and my best friends all live in town. And so we're all really tight knit and able to help each other out. And my aunt got power back before the rest of the family, so we all spent like 3 days. Just we were there all day and making meals and hanging out. So that was nice.
Yeah, back to a little bit of communal living.
Yeah,
um,
really, it was.
Perfect. And is there anything else that, when thinking about, especially those days when you didn't have electricity, but even up until now, without the internet, what's it like to live in Cedar Rapids, and especially, with small children, and during a pandemic, what has all this been meant to you?
Yeah, it's obviously it's sad because it's my hometown and I grew up here and it's where I want to live for the rest of my life. Like I just love Cedar Rapids so much, and so it's been sad to see, a lot of small businesses had to close from the pandemic, a lot of local restaurants, and then now this, and it's causing so many issues for so many individuals and businesses, which is really heartbreaking. One thing, I took my daughter a couple days after the storm to one of the apartment complexes where I believe it, they said 85% of the people do not speak English. It's a lot of refugees from Congo. And so we went there to donate some diapers that we had on hand and some formula because there was a lot of little kids, but they're just living in tents out there, which is so sad. But it warms my heart because as soon as the word got out about that, the entire community was helping these people in these complexes, donating, giving them shelter, everything they could do to help them get back on their feet. And that's just the way Cedar Rapids is and Iowans are. And so it does really fill my bucket to see that.
That's good. That's good. A little bright spots, I guess, where you can, and
Yeah.
understand the community there is so amazing. Obviously, knowing that and having grown up there, I know we grew up just a few houses down from each other. So, um, yeah, that's great to hear. And I'm so happy that people there, it seems like everybody's very resilient and, obviously a really hard time, like you said, having businesses close and the things that you love and, everything that's familiar to you that you grew up with, really being in a tough spot. I think just the last thing I wanted to ask you about is, we had the floods in 2008 that really did a number on the city, and took a while to recover from that. It felt like
Yeah.
even years to some degree. When you're looking at the potential, recovery. What does it mean to you to, how do you think that'll go? What does it mean to you to kind of revitalize this community and make sure that, it is a nice place where you can stay and live, for the rest of your life and raise your children there?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be important for everyone to be patient, first of all, which I think we've done a good job of. Obviously, there's still debris all over in the streets. A lot of us are still out of internet, and this stuff is going to take time. The companies are working as hard as they can, and the best that everyone can pitch in to make things go faster is great. But we do just need to be patient, and in the long term, you know, we're going to need to see the trees come back. We lost a ton of our tree canopy, which is, not only bad for us and for the beautiful city, but for the animals as well, and the insects and everyone who relies on the ecosystem. So hopefully, people will start planting trees again, and we can see that come back and support local businesses, which I know we already do a great job of. But the more that we can really help support those local organizations and donate for those who have the means, I think that'll all be really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for jumping on and sharing all this with me. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention or think is a really important part of the story of this Derecho as well as Cedar Rapids that you wanted to add in?
I think the last thing is just reiterating that, I love the people of Cedar Rapids and the people of Iowa, and they've done such a great job of coming together and staying positive. I've seen so many stories online where out of towners are like, you guys are just so positive and grateful. And we are, that's just kind of the way we're raised and the way we, live life, which is great and in difficult times. So, yeah, that's just something I love to see.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Sarah, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Laura.